What's going on, everyone? It's Loaded Ridley. I'm back with another reaction video, but not to a music video or anything related to music. Today I'm going to be reacting to a historical or a history kind of lesson, the history of the United States in 10 minutes. As an American, I know there's been a lot of different aspects and a lot of war and other things that have been involved in American history ever since our independence from Great Britain in 1776. So I'm just going to go through, see if there's some things that I may not know. I'm pretty big on history, so I think I'm going to recognize a lot of things that are said during this. But yeah, let's just check it out and see what it's all about. But please be sure to give a like, subscribe, and please look out for more videos. Thanks. Let's make it appear right there. Make it big. All right, let's go. History of the United States.
Even if the United States of America emerged as an independent country after 1776 and recognized in 1783.
13 colonies. I'm actually from one of the 13 colonies. If you can guess that in the comments, well, try and guess it in the comments and let me know which state do you think I'm from one of the 13 colonies.
The history of these lands is deeper than that. Thousands of years ago, the first people settled in the American continent. It is not exactly known how the Native Americans first settled in these territories.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that's really big for debate, too, is like how the original Native Americans actually made their way to the United States or the continent of North America. I know a lot of people talk about them coming over from Asia through the Arctic Passage that kind of connects Russia and Alaska today. With that ground like being frozen or something like that connected, they were able to make their way over. I think that's like another history lesson to look at, like how they're actually be able to do that. But yeah, pretty interesting just to think about how people were able to migrate over to a totally different continent during those times.
It is not exactly known how the Native Americans first settled in these territories, but a theory says that people migrated from Eurasia starting 30,000 years ago across a land bridge known as Beringia.
So I didn't know it was an actual land bridge. That's pretty interesting. That's actually something new for me that I didn't know, that there was an actual land bridge connecting Eurasia and North America together. I thought it was more of a frozen bridge that they were able to cross using the Arctic, using the Arctic territory. But that's interesting. That's something I didn't know at all. Pretty interesting.
1,000 years ago, across a land bridge known as Beringia. This connected Siberia to North America during the Ice Age. This migration continued until 10,000 years ago. At that time, a glacial period ended, and the land bridge became submerged by the rising ocean. But before we move any further, we want to give a big thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Raid is a brand new RPG game that you will definitely enjoy. The game has an amazing storyline, great looking 3D graphics, and looks. She is not the only awesome champion, but in my opinion, you should. The game is consistently updated, so you will not get how amazing the 1,000 silver. The early inhabitants were called the Paleo-Americans. In time, they migrated even deeper in Americas, and they formed tribes and nations. They created interesting civilizations, developing their own culture. Among the cultures that existed here, we can mention Adena culture, Iroquois culture, Coles Creek culture, Puebloan culture, and Mississippian culture. But another part of today...
I think Mississippian might be attributed towards more to Cherokee tribes from the Native Americans back then, because I think they originated around that area within the United States. So I'm pretty sure they're tied to the Cherokees.
The United States has an interesting and different history. Speaking about Hawaii, this land wasn't inhabited until the 1st centuries AD. Native development started with the settlement of Polynesian people between the 1st and 10th centuries. Starting in the 15th century, European colonization began. In 1492, a Spanish expedition headed by the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus sailed west to find a new trade route to the...
So I think a lot of Americans are confused on where exactly Christopher Columbus discovered. From what I understand, he discovered Hispaniola, which is current present-day Haiti Dominican Republic. First, he didn't discover the United States of America. He discovered more of the Caribbean or the Caribbean islands first, and I think a lot of people get that confused.
Far east, but landed in what came to be known to Europeans as the New World. After this event, in the next decades, more and more ships sailed west to establish colonies and trade posts. The Spaniards began building their American empire, using islands such as Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola as bases. They expanded hugely. France founded colonies in eastern North America.
So a little bit of my background too. I do have some French in me. My grandmother is from Canada. She's French Canadian. So a lot of this does tie to me as well. So I have both of my sides of the family kind of come from the southern part of the United States, and then the other part comes from the northern part of the United States. So I'm kind of mixed in between, as you can tell.
America, a number of Caribbean islands and small coastal parts of South America. Portugal colonized Brazil. The eastern seacoast was settled primarily by English colonists in the 17th century, along with a much smaller number of Dutch and Swedes. The first successful English colony, Jamestown, was established in 1607 on the James River in Virginia. New wave of settlers arrived in the late 17th century and established commercial
If you've ever seen the Disney movie Pocahontas, that's the story about Jamestown, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Agriculture, based on tobacco. Even though there were some conflicts between the Native Americans and English settlers, the colonies managed to expand pretty fast, and more people settled in. Each of the 13 American colonies had slightly different governmental structure. In fact, a colony was ruled by a governor appointed from London. This governor controlled the administration and relied upon a locally elected legislature to vote taxes and make laws. By the 18th century,
I think that's a pretty interesting concept too that they had. Being from Great Britain, you assign a governor to control a colony, and he pretty much has the rule of the land with the powers from the King of England, pretty much. He's representing the King of England forward. I think that's pretty interesting. I know the Romans did that too when they were exploring and had different settlements throughout their territory that they conquered. So I know that the British, I guess, also did a similar thing to the Romans there.
The American colonies were growing very rapidly, and as a result of low death rates, along with ample supplies of land and food, this attracted a heavy flow of immigrants. The tobacco and rice plantations imported African slaves for labor from the British colonies in the West Indies, and by the 1770s, African slaves comprised a fifth of the American population. The question of independence from Britain did not arise as long as the colonies needed British military support against the French and Spanish powers. The French and Indian War was an event created by the political development of the colonies. It was also part of the larger 7 Years' War. Britain beat French forces, and France lost their colonies and territories in Canada and Louisiana. The war was costly, and Britain needed money. The British Parliament passed the Stamp Act of 1765, imposing a tax on the colonies without going through the colonial legislatures. The issue was drawn. Did Parliament have this right to tax Americans who were not represented in it? Crying, "No taxation without representation." The colonists refused to pay the taxes, as tensions escalated in the late 1760s and early 1770s. The Boston Tea Party in 1773 was marked as the start of the Revolution. It happened in the town of Boston to protest against the new tax on tea. Parliament quickly responded the next year with the Coercive Acts, stripping Massachusetts of its historic right of self-government and putting it under army rule, which sparked outrage and resistance in all 13 colonies. Leaders from all 13 colonies gathered and created the First Continental Congress to coordinate their resistance. The Congress called for a boycott of British trade, published a list of rights and grievances, and petitioned the king for redress of those grievances. It wasn't about independence at that point, but this appeal had no effect, and so the Second Continental Congress was created in 1775. In order to organize the defense of the colonies against the British Army. The 13 colonies began a rebellion against British rule in 1775 and proclaimed their independence in 1776 as the United States of America. In the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, the Americans captured the British invasion army at Saratoga in 17...
Damn, actually looking at 1775 to 1783, that is a long war. That is an 8-year war they were fighting. Wow. 8 years to fight for your independence. That is crazy. 8 years.
1777, secured the Northeast and encouraged the French to make a military alliance with the United States. France brought in Spain and the Netherlands,
Oui, oui.
thus balancing the military and naval forces on each side, as Britain had no allies. General George Washington was an excellent organizer
First
and
US president.
administrator who worked successfully with Congress and the state governors, selecting and mentoring his senior officers, supporting and training his troops, and maintaining an idealistic Republican army. The American Revolution was a success, and at the Peace of Paris of 1783, their independence was recognized. And even so, the former colonies gained more than expected. The expansion to the west started, incorporating the Amerindian lands west of the Appalachian.
So the United States started expanding out land territory claims following the Revolutionary War. And you'll see, too, the expansion out west would even grow even further from where it is right now, which it looks like the Mississippi River. I could be mistaken, but that looks like the Mississippi River there, where it's cut off.
Mountains. A deal was made by the United States President Thomas Jefferson in 1803. He bought the Louisiana Territory from France.
Yeah.
Initial diplomats sent to France were allowed to spend up to $10 million in order to buy just New Orleans, and, if possible, the west bank of the Mississippi River. But the French government said that for $5 million more, all of the Louisiana Territory would be sold. The president approved the deal, and the U.S.
For another $5 million? Let me go back.
possible the west bank of the Mississippi River. But the French government said that for $5 million more, all of
$5 million more for all that territory that you see there in blue from France. $5 million. Can you imagine that today? $5 million? I know it's not inflation and everything like that. It'd probably be more in the trillions, but yeah, that's pretty crazy. $5 million for all that.
the Louisiana Territory would be sold. The president approved the deal, and the U.S. doubled its size. In the middle of the 19th century, some cessions were happening, and Texas in joining the Union in 1845,
Texas.
and after the war against Mexican Empire, the United States will take important lands and expand even further. In 1861, after Abraham Lincoln was elected, some states from the South, the Confederation, attacked the rest. The South Revolt was happening due to controversy over the enslavement of black people. In 1860, the United States was led by Abraham Lincoln, supporting banning slavery in all territories. War broke out in April 1861, when secessionist forces attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina. After 4 years of war, the Union achieved its victory, and the Confederates were defeated.
So like that, 8 years that we fought England or Great Britain for the independence of the United States to succeed from the empire of Great Britain, and only 4 years long was the American Civil War, which I'm almost 100% guaranteed was claimed more lives during the American Civil War. That's just insane. Obviously, you have the modernization of warfare and weaponry and everything like that too, but it's just crazy.
Unity was slowly restored. The national government expanded its power. The 19th century was a period of economic expansion. More and more industries were created, and also the accent was put on infrastructure. In 1898, the American-Spanish War is happening. Americans are winning in short term some battles.
Yeah, so the Spanish-American War, I think a lot of people are not even familiar, or even know that this war even took place in the late 1800s into the 1900s. We did take Cuba from Spain during this time frame. We gained Puerto Rico, which is still a U.S. territory, and Guam, which is still a U.S. territory today. And we actually gained the Philippine Islands as a U.S. territory, but following World War II, the Philippines gained their independence from us. Following World War II. But all of that for $20 million. Like, that's crazy land changes, expansions, and everything like that during these times. It's just insane. You can never even think about something like this occurring today at all.
And at the Treaty of Paris, US is getting the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. At the beginning of the 20th century, World War I started. Even though the US was neutral due to German attacks on the American ships and due to their intentions to make Mexico join against the US, the Americans joined the Allies. After this event, the economy was growing and all was good, until the Great Depression, which started in 1929. This event shook the world and created a base on which the Second World War will start. United States joined the Allies after being attacked at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941.
I might do another reaction to like the historical events behind World War II. I'm pretty sure I'll do one of those. But just seeing the expansion of the Empire of Japan out in the Indo-Pacific region, and then them striking Hawaii from where they were currently positioned, is insane. If you look at like the military tactics and everything that went into planning that and then executing it as well.
By the Japanese Empire. Americans fought a distant war in Europe, Pacific, and they provided supplies to the Soviets.
Like Okinawa.
Armored cars, motorized equipment, food, etc. Winning battle by battle in the Pacific, getting closer to the Japanese mainland, and after D-Day in Europe in 1944, the Americans managed to have a great impact and to help a lot on the Allied side. The war ended in 1945. Germany capitulated in May, and Japan in September after the 2 nuclear bombs dropped at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States and Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers in the aftermath of World War II.
Cold War.
This was a period known as the Cold War. The two countries confronted each other indirectly in the arms race, proxy wars across...
You're talking about the expansion of development of nuclear weapons, and then just both the Americans, us, and the Soviet Union just building and building and building more and more and more nuclear capable missiles. And if you look at like the total amount of missiles that were built then, you would just, it's unbelievable to think how many times over you could have destroyed the United States, or not the United States, but the world with those weapons.
Across the world, including the Korean and Vietnam Wars and propaganda campaigns. The purpose of this was to stop the spread of communism. In the 1960s, waves of civil rights movements started, rights of voting and freedom of movement to African Americans and other racial minorities. The Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union. After, the United States has been focusing on modern conflicts in the Middle East. The beginning of the 21st century saw the September 11th attacks carried out by Al-Qaeda in 2001, which was...
That's always like a question that people ask, like, where were you during September 11th? I was a freshman in high school, and I wasn't even told the full story of what occurred until I actually got home after spending, I think we spent the whole day in school, which is kind of weird, being from, if you guess what state I was from. But yeah... I didn't find out until I got home and then turned on the news that both of the towers were taken down. Pretty surreal to think back to that now, like living through something like that has occurred. But yeah, where were you during the 9/11 attacks?
It was later followed by the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2008, the United States had its worst economic crisis since the Great Depression.
That's it. Well, that was interesting. Interesting historical perspective of the United States. You can almost tell pretty much throughout its entire history, the United States has been involved in some sort of military conflict, whether that's abroad or internally, as you saw within the 1700s and the 1800s with the Revolutionary War and then the Civil War. So pretty interesting just to see where the country started at and then where we are today as a nation. Obviously, everybody knows history repeats itself in instances, not necessarily repeating whole aspects of what occurred in the past, but there's always elements of the past that do come back and do affect countries today. And every country has their own, historical background and the way that they developed as a nation. I mean, you can go back and do a video of any other country, and you'll see hardships, you'll see war, you'll see conflict. within it. But that's just all part of the history, and that's what makes all of our different countries different, I think. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting take. If you guys like that reaction video to him and want me to do more, please let me know in the comments. And also, please give a like and subscribe if you also want to see more too. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.